Hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of our podcast video. Today's topic is very different. It's about Indian Three Languages Policy in National Education Policy 2020. So let's start.
It's amazing how some things that have been brewing for ages suddenly become like the topic everyone's talking about.
Right.
And we're seeing that now with this whole North-South thing in India.
Yeah.
You know, the economics of it all.
Mm-hmm.
Southern states feeling like, hey, we're putting in more than we're getting back.
Yeah, the tax revenue versus...
Exactly. And then the political side, too.
Oh, for sure.
This whole delimitation thing looming on the horizon after 2026 could really shake things up representation-wise.
It's a really interesting time, lots of moving pieces.
No kidding. And right in the thick of it all, this whole language debate flares up again.
Oh, yeah.
Tamil Nadu going head-to-head with the union government over that three-language formula.
You'd think it was ancient history, but nope, it's back with a vengeance.
And for this deep dive, we're really digging into this opinion piece.
Yeah, this one's a good one.
Three-language row and some hard facts you can't wish away by Shashi Tharoor.
He's an MP from Kerala, right?
That's right. So he's coming at it from another southern state's perspective.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting.
Adds a whole other layer to it.
Totally. So what we're aiming for in this deep dive is to really unpack why this is happening now.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this language policy, which has been around for decades, suddenly such a huge point of friction again?
Especially for Tamil Nadu.
Especially for Tamil Nadu. What's going on there? And bigger picture, what does it tell us about how India is dealing with its own diversity, its federalism, all of that?
Huge questions.
Okay, so first things first. This three-language formula, this isn't something brand new, right? Where did it even come from?
It's got a long history.
Yeah.
It actually goes back to the 1968 National Policy on Education.
Wow, 1968.
So yeah, we're talking over 50 years.
So what was the thinking back then? Why introduce this formula in the first place?
Well, the big idea was to encourage multilingualism across India.
Makes sense.
So the way it worked, or was supposed to work, was each student learns three languages. First, their own regional language, their mother tongue.
Right, so that's the base.
Then, Hindi as the second language, unless you were already in a Hindi-speaking state.
Oh, interesting.
In those cases, they learn a different Indian language.
Okay, so there was some flexibility built in.
A little bit.
And then English was the third language.
Yeah, English for everyone.
The goal being to create a more, linguistically versatile population.
Exactly. People comfortable with multiple languages.
Sounds good in theory. Promote multilingualism. Connect people.
Right.
So what happened? Why is this blowing up now? What's the immediate spark that set this whole thing off?
Well, as the article points out, it's the union government's decision to withhold educational funds from Tamil Nadu.
Really?
Yeah, they're doing it through the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan.
Okay, so that's a pretty big deal.
It is, and the reason they're giving is that Tamil Nadu won't implement the three-language formula in its schools.
So it's like a do this or else kind of situation.
Basically, they're using funding as leverage to get Tamil Nadu on board.
And that's really the heart of the issue.
Yeah, this move by the central government has reignited this whole debate, and it's causing a lot of tension.
And Tamil Nadu's reaction has been
pretty strong,
to put it mildly.
Yeah.
They have a history of opposing this formula, right? What's behind that resistance?
It's deep-rooted.
Yeah.
It's about their history, their identity, the pride they have in the Tamil language, and their culture. For decades, they've stuck to a two-language policy, Tamil and English.
Okay.
The idea of adding Hindi is seen as an imposition, a threat to their language and their heritage.
It's interesting because the word the article uses is Hindi imperialism.
Yeah, it's a strong term.
It is. But it speaks to how seriously they take this.
Right. It's not just about language. It's about power and cultural dominance.
So this isn't just some recent thing, is it? This resistance has deep roots.
Oh, absolutely.
The article talks about past protests, even riots over Hindi being imposed.
Unfortunately, there have even been cases of people setting themselves on fire, even deaths.
Wow, it's that intense?
It shows how deeply people feel about this.
And it makes sense why Tamil Nadu is the only state that doesn't have those Jawaharlal Navodaya Vidyalayas.
Yeah, the central government funds those schools completely.
But Hindi is mandatory there.
Exactly, and that's a deal breaker for Tamil Nadu.
And M.K. Stalin, the chief minister, he's really come out swinging against this.
He has.
The article mentions how he's criticizing the NEP 2020.
Yeah, the National Education Policy.
We're tying funding to the three-language formula.
He's called it coercive, politically motivated, basically saying it's being used to push an agenda.
And he's concerned about
Managed by this policy.
And he had that quote, "Do not throw stones at a beehive."
It's a pretty powerful image.
Yeah, it's a warning.
He's saying this could get really messy really fast.
So we've got Tamil Nadu's side of things, but what about the union government? What are they saying in defense of the three-language formula and this whole funding situation?
Well, the Union Education Minister, Dharmendra Pradhan, has come out and said that the NEP doesn't force any language on anyone.
Interesting.
He's arguing that it's about giving students more opportunities, broadening their horizons.
Okay.
And he's directly appealed to Tamil Nadu to put the kids first, to look past the political stuff.
Right.
And the article does point out that NEP 2020 has some flexibility on that third language choice.
Oh, right. It's not just Hindi or bust.
Exactly. You need 3 languages, but at least 2 have to be Indian languages.
So there's some wiggle room.
And even students get some choice there.
And we're seeing private schools offering foreign languages.
Yeah, parents are pushing for that.
So the demand is there.
Absolutely.
And I guess the argument for the three-language formula at the national level is that it could lead to a more linguistically skilled population.
Right. People who can communicate better across regions.
And that might even help with national unity, bring people together.
Yeah, that's the hope.
But the article also talks about how unevenly the three-language formula has been implemented.
It's all over the map.
Regional politics, cultural preferences, even just finding teachers.
It's a logistical nightmare.
Yeah, sounds like a real challenge.
So you have most non-Hindi speaking states offering their regional language, Hindi and English.
Tamil Nadu being the outlier.
Right. They're holding firm on their 2-language policy.
And then in Hindi-speaking states, the third language is often
Sanskrit.
but like a basic level of Sanskrit.
Yeah, which kind of defeats the purpose, according to the critics.
Right. The idea was to learn another modern Indian language. The article gives the example of Uttar Pradesh.
Yeah, how many students there are actually learning Tamil? Probably not many.
Especially when you consider that students in Chennai are expected to learn Hindi.
It seems a little one-sided.
It does raise questions about fairness.
And the article mentions Haryana. They're doing the 3-language thing. What's that look like?
So for 9th and 10th grade, English and Hindi are mandatory.
And then the third language is optional.
So there's the loophole.
And the choices are usually Sanskrit, Punjabi, or Urdu.
Sticking to the familiar.
Pretty much.
This whole funding issue brings up another point.
Yeah.
It really highlights the power dynamic between the central government and the states.
A lot of tension there.
The article talks about coercive federalism.
A big word for a big issue.
What does that even mean in this context?
Basically, Tamil Nadu is saying that education is a shared responsibility.
Both the union and the states have a say.
Right. It's on the concurrent list in the Constitution.
And they're arguing that by holding back funds to force them to adopt the NEP 2020, and specifically the three-language formula,
Yeah.
the central government is overstepping, basically bullying them into compliance.
That's the argument.
And withholding these funds could have serious consequences for education in Tamil Nadu, right?
No question.
Especially for those who depend on government schools.
It's about teacher salaries, student programs, infrastructure, all the things that keep schools running.
But the union government has their side of the story, too.
Of course.
What's their rationale for linking funding to policy like this?
Their argument is that it's about ensuring quality.
Across all states.
Making sure education is up to a certain standard everywhere.
And promoting multilingualism.
Right. That's the national goal they're pushing for.
So from their perspective, these conditional grants are a way to make sure the money is being used the way it's supposed to be.
For the greater good.
But it does create this tension.
Huge tension.
Between the central government's vision and the state's right to autonomy.
Absolutely.
The article even mentions how Prime Minister Modi talks about cooperative governance.
Yeah, but this doesn't seem very cooperative.
Exactly. It seems like it could undermine that whole approach.
Undermine relationships, create more conflict.
So where do we go from here? Any ideas on how to break this deadlock?
The article does offer some suggestions.
Okay, lay them on me.
One big one is focusing on flexibility.
Okay, so not being so rigid.
Exactly. Give states more leeway in choosing that third language.
So Tamil Nadu could pick another Indian language.
Or even a foreign language.
Instead of Hindi.
Right. It's about honoring their cultural and linguistic context.
That seems more in line with the NEP's own emphasis on flexibility.
Right. It's walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
The article also talks about shifting from penalties to incentives.
Yeah. Instead of taking away funding.
Reward states for doing the right thing. Reward states for doing the right thing.
Offer bonuses for promoting multilingualism.
And maybe even give extra support for teaching regional languages.
Across the board, even in Hindi-speaking states.
That would be a nice change.
It would show a commitment to real understanding, not just forcing conformity.
And maybe a change in how they're communicating.
Yeah, less top-down, more dialogue.
Collaboration instead of dictation.
Exactly.
The article suggests the central government could try a softer approach.
More persuasive, highlighting the benefits of multilingualism.
Appealing to people's self-interest.
In a way, yeah, like, hey, this will make you smarter, more mobile, open up job opportunities.
That's cool stuff.
And maybe they could run some pilot programs.
Show how the three-language formula could work in practice.
Let states see the results before they commit.
That's a good idea.
Evidence-based policymaking.
I like it.
It takes the pressure off, lets everyone breathe a little.
Beyond the policy stuff, the article makes a good point about why people actually learn languages.
It's about utility, right?
Yeah, people learn what they need.
What will help them get by, get ahead.
Or even just for fun.
Like Bollywood movies.
Right. They've had a huge impact on Hindi in the South.
People want to understand what they're watching.
So any language policy has to take that into account.
Make it relevant to people's lives.
Otherwise, it's just words on paper.
And there's the whole migration thing, too.
People moving all over the country for work and education.
It's a natural language exchange.
North to south, south to north.
Learning out of necessity.
The article even has that story about Dilshad.
Oh, yeah, the son of a Bihari laborer and caroler.
Who ended up topping the state's Malayalam exams.
Incredible.
Talk about assimilation.
It shows that it can happen, especially when there's a need.
It all boils down to communication, doesn't it? A real understanding between the central government and the states.
Collaborative federalism.
That's the key. The article really hammers that home.
It applies to so many issues.
Not just language, but the delimitation debate, too.
It's about finding solutions that work for everyone.
And the article mentions the Interstate Council.
Yeah, it's a platform for dialogue.
But it doesn't seem to be used much.
Which is a shame, because it could be really valuable.
It could be a place where everyone comes to the table.
Talk things through, find common ground.
Maybe this whole language controversy can be a wake-up call.
Maybe it'll push them to revive these platforms for dialogue.
Find ways to bridge the gap between national goals and regional needs.
It's about respect. Finding that balance.
This deep dive has really shown how tricky it is to balance national education goals with the strong linguistic identities in different parts of India.
It's a tightrope walk.
And it leaves us with a final thought for you, dear listener.
I like where this is going.
With all this internal migration happening and people learning languages based on what they need, how do you think language learning in India will evolve in the future?
It's a fascinating question.
Will it be driven by policy or by individual choice and necessity?
What do you think?